Trump's sole criminal conviction is now in legal limbo after the Supreme Court's immunity decision. The judge overseeing Trump's New York hush money trial delayed the sentencing hearing for Trump's 34 felony convictions until September 18th, at the earliest, to give time to weigh how the Supreme Court's decision could impact this case. The decision following the Manhattan DA's office agreeing to a delay. The sentencing was originally scheduled for next week. Now it could happen just weeks before the presidential election. Trump's lawyer wrote to Judge Merchan on Monday, just hours after the Supreme Court's decision granting presidential immunity for official acts was released. In his letter, Trump's lawyer is asking Judge Merchan to allow them to file a motion to set aside the jury's guilty verdict, further arguing that some of the evidence presented by prosecutors would fall under official acts. You may recall, Trump's hush money case largely was about business records and hinged on payments that Trump made to his personal attorney, Michael Cohen, reimbursing him for a $130,000 payment he made to adult film star Stormy Daniels to silence her before the 2016 presidential election. Joining me now is News Nation legal contributor Jesse Weber and trial attorney and legal analyst Misty Marris. Guys, welcome. You and I have been discussing this New York hush money trial for months now. It may even be years. Let's talk about Judge Merchan. He previously ruled against a motion made by Trump's lawyers trying to delay the case. He denied the motion, saying the case did not hinge on Trump's official acts as president. How does the Supreme Court decision now change that, Misty?
Well, the law has changed. So the Trump team had raised that before the trial and said that official acts were at issue. But at the time, the law had not been clarified by SCOTUS. And so now the SCOTUS decision, not only does it say that a president can't be charged for anything that falls under official acts, they also went so far as to say that evidence relating to official acts, even if it's not part of the charge conduct and was just in the record for the purposes of giving context, for providing information surrounding the actual alleged crime, well, that's inadmissible. So now it requires a deep dive back into this trial to see what, if anything, and to go through the Supreme Court analysis that's now been set forth in this decision to see if anything falls under that umbrella. And that evidence would have to be excluded, wouldn't be admissible in court.
Yeah.
Jesse, yes, please.
I was going to say, and a couple of things that you could look at the trial that maybe shouldn't have been included now that we look at the Supreme Court decision is Hope Hicks' testimony. So the idea that Donald Trump having these conversations with his advisors, you could say that was official conduct. His tweets that he was sending as president, official conduct. Signing a government ethics form about the reimbursement schedule, got official conduct. Now, to be clear, right, you would have to also make the mental leap here and say, okay, maybe this stuff shouldn't have been included. Maybe the jury shouldn't have heard it. But does it rise to the level where you can say that the jury's verdict would have been different? I would say there was so much else that was introduced in the course of this trial, so much else, witness testimony, the records, that I don't think it really would have changed the jury's mind that he deserves necessarily a new trial.
I was actually reading your notes, Jesse. You said that certain pieces of evidence the jury shouldn't have seen.
That's correct.
You stick with that, yes.
Well, under the new Supreme Court ruling.
In the last 24 hours.
And in the last 24 hours, we're all learning the new law.
Right.
And
we're all
maybe
figuring it out.
I think there's a colorable argument they shouldn't have seen that.
Yeah.
Well, Trump's lawyers are asking to file a motion to set aside the verdict. Do you think the judge could allow that and throw out the conviction, Jesse?
So I think that there's a strong look. The judge has now opened up the possibility for arguments to be made about this. I think that there's an avenue to say this shouldn't have been included. Does it rise to the level of we need to throw out the entire conviction? As I said, it made the point that the jury could have probably convicted him even if none of that evidence came in. But I think there's also an argument to be made. It prejudiced the jury. It shouldn't have been allowed in. And maybe this conviction has to be thrown out.
Yeah, they have to do they have to brief it. That's what's going to happen. So now the prosecution asked to submit a brief, and it's going to be all about exactly, I think Jesse might want to do some consulting with the prosecutors because you set forth the arguments. But the question is, okay, so even if the judge says this is not going to get thrown out on this particular motion, then it would be left up to the appellate division to make that determination about whether or not this evidence was actually going to make an impact or should not have been in the courtroom. And I think under this new standard, it's not so clear what's going to happen.
And to be clear, I don't think that we're saying that what Donald Trump was accused of doing as part of this scheme, or what he's found guilty of, was official conduct. It was still private conduct. It's still unofficial conduct. It's just what evidence was admitted during the course of the trial that shouldn't have been admitted.
There's so many details here. Just as a reminder to our viewers, this was a case that was about business records. Ultimately, Stormy Daniels was initially paid off by Michael Cohen before Trump was president. The case is all about actions taken during the campaign. So does it matter that the checks to pay Michael Cohen Cohen back were written after he was elected. Is that considered an official act, Misty?
Well, I don't think that they're even making that argument. They're making the argument about those 3 specific buckets, but do they expand it and say everything that happened while he was in the White House could potentially constitute an official act,
right,
or have the presumption that it's a presumption of immunity? So there are 2 different standards. I don't think you're going to see those checks fall into that bucket, but there's certainly evidence that came into that trial that, based on the Supreme Court's decision, specifically Hope Hicks' testimony, because I think it's very much akin to what they said about the DOJ, but that really could have been, that should have been precluded under this new standard. So it's not going to be everything, Hannah, but it could be enough that this verdict is scrapped and a new trial has to go forward.
And I'll just say the Supreme Court kind of talked about this in their opinion. They say you look at a speech from a president, you know, the president has a right to speak to the American people. We could say that's official conduct, but if he's also making a speech in his capacity as a candidate during the campaign, that would be unofficial conduct. That would be private conduct. So I guess the repayment schedule, you could say, wasn't about him being president.
Let's say the conviction is thrown out. Could they present the case with less evidence now adhering with what happened at the Supreme Court yesterday, Jesse?
Yes, and
they could.
I think they could still get a conviction because you could still have Michael Cohen. You could still have the payment schedule. All that would still come in under this. I mean, yes, there's a certain aspects of it that wouldn't come in that would have definitely made the prosecution's case stronger. But I would say, and correct me if I'm wrong, Misty, I think they still can get a conviction based on this.
I don't know. I would say we don't know what would or wouldn't because the standard is so new, and it would absolutely be tested on the appellate side.
Sure.
And a judge or somebody has to go through all of this and make that distinction between what's official, what's private, and not just on the charged crime, on the evidence. And that's what I think is so novel about the SCOTUS decision. It really changes the way the trajectory of all of these cases.
How complicated is it to decipher official acts and unofficial acts?
It's quite complicated.
24 hours.
It seems very complicated.
Because it's not necessarily that clear.
Right.
There's a little bit of guidance in the Supreme Court decision, but then the rest of it says, well, it has to go back to the judge to make these distinctions, which again, then it goes back up that chain of the appellate system until the legal standards are clarified. So while there's some guidance, but it's not crystal clear.
Yeah.
Right. And by the way, you know, we usually say when there's a legal issue decided by the Supreme Court, oh, this will be litigated for years. Well, I certainly hope not, because that would mean that presidents would be accused of wrongdoing and charged with crimes, and we have to determine through the courts whether or not that's official conduct or not. So we have this limited issue with Donald Trump, and back in the federal court, they're going to work it out with the Jack Smith case, but that's going to be appealed and go back to the Supreme Court. We might not have answers as to official versus unofficial for quite some time.
Jesse Weber, Misty Marris, always breaking it down for us. Thank you so much.
You got it.
Thank you.
And